Debuffs and Crush Them All is the topic for this video. This can be a confusing topic for some players, but by the end of today's video you should be able to easily identify which heroes are debuff heroes, how to use them effectively, and how to prepare against them when you see them. There is a very useful graphic image we will be showing near the end of the video to help better visualize this information as well. This is a community-driven video, meaning that the heroes featured are the heroes you requested in the comment section of the most recent video. There will be other opportunities to contribute to these videos, so if you haven't already done so, I'd ask you to subscribe to this channel so you can catch all my videos when they come out and stay up to date on all the latest Crush Them All news and information. And before we really get started, I'd like to extend an invitation for you to come and play Crush Them All with me. I'm starting a guild called Shadowhood, and I'm looking for active players. Ideal candidates should have around 5 million power or more, though if you are below this and feel you'd be a strong contributor to the team, then let me know. Now that's uppercase S, lowercase h, and uppercase D. Now that's the guild tag. As of right now, the guild status is open, so feel free to join with no need to apply. Now first and foremost today, we will be defining what this topic is about. Debuffing is a negative effect that happens as a result of an attack or ability. There are a lot of different debuff effects in Crush Them All, and today we're going to be discussing all of those as well as the heroes who inflict debuff. From the top, we have debuffs that decrease enemy attack speed, decrease enemy hit points, decrease enemy defense, decrease enemy move speed, decrease enemy AoE damage, inflict slowdown, inflict defense down, inflict attack down, inflict blind, decrease critical damage, decrease effect duration, debuff healing effect, and some argument could also be made for effects such as poison, burning, freeze, evade up, and stun, though these don't truly cause a debuff against an inflicted enemy. What's important about debuffs is that they ultimately will make the battles you have easier, but it will make your battles take longer. Preferably in your favor, though if you find yourself timing out on battles, you should probably start focusing strongly on DPS to get past that hurdle. Debuffs and Crush Them All divide. They don't subtract. So 100% attack reduction doesn't result in 0, it results in 50%. Likewise, 500% reduction results in 20%, and so on. There are some heroes that inflict debuff that are considered among the best and most important heroes in the game. Dark Hunter leads the way as being the easiest of debuff heroes to max, since his medals are readily available from many sources in the game. In fact, besides rare exceptions, if you're playing the game following standard advice, then Dark Hunter should be the very first rare hero that you max. Dark Hunter offers a massively important debuff attack, which helps minimize damage from all enemy heroes, helping your heroes last longer. This applies for PvP modes and for PvE modes, like Guild Raid events, where having Dark Hunter in your lineup will help with survival against this boss. It is also worth noting that Dark Hunter's attack debuff is reduced in PvP modes like Arena and Guild Wars, but this doesn't diminish the value of his ability. All of this aside, Dark Hunter is also pretty formidable for DPS and PvP modes and should be strongly considered for Awakened Stars. You could safely make your own Dark Hunter 759 or 769 without regret. The next big debuff heroes are Vlad and Kosume. They feature what many consider to be the best debuff ability in the game at this time. Both of these heroes debuff enemy attack per second, and they are not affected by the PvP reduced values. They do have diminishing returns when used together, but honestly, both in a lineup are better than one alone. In Guild Wars, it is generally best to split these two heroes up and take advantage of their debuff against multiple teams. This is not always true for fort and castle defense. Sometimes it is best to put a stacked team that has both Vlad and Kosume in your castle in some cases. Sometimes a full arena team in castle is the best option to go to depending on your matchup. So this is honestly a case by case, but use your best discretion or ask advice from a more experienced player. The reason why this ability is so important is because it blatantly reduces the amount of times the enemy attacks your heroes. This applies to guild raid events as well, meaning they can help your heroes both attacking and defending in these modes, as there are less attacks from the enemy. Kage is the next important debuff hero with debuff enemy HP. I'm not even going to pretend to fully understand the calculation involved for determining the HP reduction, but this is what it looks like for those of you who are interested. Now, Mr. Moogle has rephrased it into a more simple to understand concept, which is a maxed Kage basically multiplies all of your hero's damage against the enemy by 1.4 times. This can be pretty substantial when considering a maxed Kage for PvP purposes. In player versus enemy modes, like guild raid events, Kage is crucial for hitters as he greatly reduces the overall amount of HP necessary to take down an enemy boss. This likewise translates to the Crusade mode bosses, and you should be saving your Kage for these interactions to make killing those bosses that much easier for you. Next up we have Trickster, and the grab bag of debuffs that he brings to the table. So first off, his 4-star ability essentially increases debuff duration for negative statuses of enemy heroes, so this extends effects like your poisons, burns, freezes, and stuns. Not your debuffs, as those are passive and last the whole battle. Where Trickster comes into play is actually his 2-star ability, which can inflict Attack Down, which is an ability also shared with Dragonbot, Slow Down, and Defense Down. Attack Down lowers the attack of enemy heroes, Slow Down does exactly that, it slows down their movement, and Defense Down makes them easier to kill by lowering their defense stat. Very straightforward and very useful across the board in terms of debuffs. Trickster does also feature the ability to stun as part of his 2-star ability as well, but again, stun isn't really considered a debuff. Now, Dark Knight is the next hero on today's list. Dark Knight brings the debuff Enemy Defense ability, which can be considered a lesser variant of Kage's debuff Enemy HP ability. Key differences are that it's basically only useful for PvP modes, since guild raid event bosses do not have any defense. So it's useless to use Dark Knight against enemy bosses unless you're running him in Nimble Knight Survival, and that has nothing to do with his ability. Now, for PvP modes, his debuff does make it a bit easier to kill enemy heroes, especially for non-gunner DPS heroes. His ability is one of those reduced in PvP modes, so take that into consideration as well. Dark Wolf brings in the ability to debuff enemy move speed. You'll see this hero in conjunction with some light-centric speed teams designed to trap you on your crystal while they deal AoE damage and get to you quickly with Hikari and Gold Knight speed buffs. These kinds of teams are rare these days, but always fun to see in action. Debuffing enemy move speed works exactly like you'd think. It slows down the enemy move speed so they walk slower. This can keep enemies bunched together, making it easier to hit squishy DPS backline heroes with AoE attacks. Not typically considered the most useful debuff, it does have some niche uses though. Dark Wolf has proven to be quite useful in Crusade mode, as it helps keep enemies bunched together, helping protect your own DPS heroes from enemy AoE attacks. Basically just helps your backline survive easier. A Slowdown is an ability that reduces both enemy speed and attack speed. 2 heroes have this ability, Gruvine and Namada. Both inflict slowdown as part of their 2-star abilities. Namada is the better of the 2 options in virtually all cases unless you're running a lot of Earth heroes, and using Gruvine for her 4-star buff ability, which she is quite good for in that capacity. Slowdown is not affected by the PvP decrease, and does work in PvE modes like guild raid events. Speaking of Namada, this would be a good time to mention elemental attack debuffs. Namada, Spark, and Thorn all offer a substantial debuff to enemy elemental attack for water, fire, and earth elements respectively. Namada debuffs water, Spark debuffs fire, and Thorn debuffs earth damage just like Dark Hunter, but these are more substantial debuffs within that specific element. Remember, Dark Hunter offers a 200% global debuff to enemy attack, These elemental debuff heroes offer an 800% element-specific debuff within their respective elements. This is huge when both attacking and defending, depending on hero's composition for PvP modes, and these debuffs also matter for surviving in guild raid events, as they can make surviving against Frostwing, Mad King, and Undead Samurai much easier in most cases. Tansu offers the same ability in lesser numbers for light heroes. This is represented in a 40% reduction starting at 4 stars and increases with star level, and he can be used to help increase survivability against both Twin Face and Gunlord. It is worth noting that you can use Dark Hunter with one or more of these elemental debuff heroes, however they do have diminishing returns. In Guild Wars, it is generally a better idea to split Dark Hunter and a good elemental debuff like Spark, putting one in Fort and the other in Castle depending on your case-by-case needs. Now, while in the water hero neighborhood, we should take a look at Manta, who brings to the table the debuff enemy AoE damage. This is a pretty significant debuff, but Manta is a scarcely used hero. This is largely due to the fact that, despite AoE being the current meta, Manta is an expensive blitz hero to max and is niche in terms of usage, mainly used for attacking when you know your target is sporting a lot of AoE against you. Manta's 2-star ability implements a second debuff, which is healing reduction. This greatly reduces the amount of healing that takes place and can mitigate threats like Vlad healing a Leaf Blade during its shield time. Manta's ability is not useful in guild raid events, as this does not minimize the damage taken, and guild raid bosses' AoE attacks surpass her ability's mitigation. Nor do guild raid bosses have healing, so her 2-star ability isn't useful in that aspect either. So she's basically only useful in specific PvP situations, and makes what would otherwise be a great debuff ability a bit too far out of reach to be used reasonably. Now next up, we have Blind, which is an ability inflicted by Ornok and Bun Gun. Blind decreases enemy speed by half and debuffs accuracy of enemy attacks substantially during the duration. It is worth noting that Blind is basically only going to afflict the frontline tank, and those are typically not going to be your strong DPS heroes on the enemy side. But it could make or break the match in some circumstances, especially in close comparisons. Now, an AoE-centric Bun Gun could inflict Blind to the backline of the enemy. However, if you have Bun Gun built, you should likely focus on single target DPS so you can handle Ornok, Chaos, and Skeleton Giant threats. And next up we have Shelley, who brings the debuff enemy critical damage ability. This can greatly mitigate enemy DPS when pitting Shelley against Tricksters, Valkyrie, and Alda. This is a PvP-centric ability and has no bearing on PvE modes, as enemy guild raid event bosses do not have any critical chance and cannot inflict critical damage. With Shelley being a tank hero, this ability helps substantially in increasing her own survival, especially against enemy Atlantis, which are typically going to be the main option to use to take a Shelley down. Atlantis' builds typically center on high crit chance and high AoE, so being able to mitigate enemy crit damage is going to be a pretty big deal. Now Paladin offers the debuff effect duration, which basically does the opposite of what Trickster's 4-star ability does. Paladin decreases negative effect duration time, meaning you'll be poisoned, burned, frozen, or stunned for a shorter amount of time before recovering. This can be very effective when facing DOT, or damage over time, teams. Paladin is another expensive blitz hero, and careful consideration should be done before investing heavily in him. His ability keeps him in the area of PvP-centric, since PvE guild raid event bosses do not inflict the negative effects listed. Now, as mentioned earlier in the video, this visual here is going to be a visual representation to help further illustrate several factors regarding debuff heroes. This graphic doesn't cover all the debuff heroes, but shows some of the most popular debuff options and how those interact with each other. You can clearly see the diminishing returns that I'd mentioned in several parts of the video earlier when you stack multiple heroes that have similar debuffs, like Vlad and Kosume in this section here. For simple math, we can assume 10,000 power for these numbers, and it makes it very easy to see how these changes happen. So basically, let's pretend I have a 10,000 attack fire hero, and I'm up against Spark and Dark Hunter. Well, going up against that matchup, I'll be debuffed to 3,333 attack power instead. This is a very significant drop. Spark alone, going up against, and I'll be down to 3,846. And Dark Hunter alone would have me at 7,143 attack. Spark is doing most of the work here in this example, but these are numbers that matter when considering debuffs in Crush Them All. And it's a very good illustration as to how the diminishing returns work as well. Now, as I conclude today's video, I'd like to give a special thanks to Medivh for making the thumbnail for this video and all of our other thumbnails, and I'm very grateful for all of his hard work. If you see him on the official Discord, be sure to give a shout out. I'd also like to thank Godsey Lab for sponsoring today's video. I'd like to thank several Discord users who helped contribute to the content covered today, namely Aristai, Longest Yaboy, Mr. Moogle, Flocky, and Kahuna. I'd also like to thank users such as yourself who watch my videos and encourage me to continue making content. Your contributions are more appreciated than you know. I would once again invite you to come and play CTA with me by joining SHD. I've dropped the link for the SHD Discord in the description below this video, so feel free to check that out. If you'd like to support this channel in other ways, there are several things you can do. Comments, likes, and subscribing are great ways to show your support. You can also show your support financially by contributing to my Patreon. The link to becoming a patron of this YouTube channel is in the description below this video as well. That's all the time we have for today, and I appreciate you watching this video through to the very end. Thanks for watching.